Welcome, family, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Indijeroo podcast. Today, for our Mindful Living series, we are welcoming Mama Keny Moon. Welcome.
Thank you, Mama Jackie, Phoenix Soul Rising.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, all the names. I'm like,
All of
my
it,
goodness.
yes.
So, I would like for you to introduce yourself to the people. Tell us about who you are, the work that you do before we delve into our mindful healing session.
Sure. All right. Well, my name is Kenyatta. Everyone is calling me Keny Moon these days, and that is the name I use for the work that I do. I am a holistic living practitioner and coach. I am also a yoga and movement guide, a meditation and mindfulness healer, as well as a Reiki and energy healer. I have a practice as well called Chama, which I'm so proud of and is just so near and dear to my heart. And Chama is my women's practice. That's the work that I do only for my sisters and with my sisters. And that work deals with the creative expression of the feminine soul, I like to say. It is power work, it is us harnessing our inner wisdom, our inner guidance, our inner power, and our feminine nature to be who we are meant to be on this planet and reconnect with what that is. And I love it. I absolutely love
Yeah.
it. I'm a mom, of course, of two beautiful daughters who are
Mhm.
14 and 12, who are my full-time and first-time jobs.
Okay.
And what else do I do? I'm an educator. That's how we met with
Hmm.
in Saroma, the school that I founded some years ago in Saroma Academy. And I continue that work in many different ways and love it immensely.
Awesome. So thank you for sharing all of those things.
Thank you.
Um, this particular podcast is the first of its kind intentionally about mindful healing. But as you mentioned, you work with healing in so many different facets. And so when I was thinking about just bringing this conversation to, I mean, my demographic is mostly women. It's not all women, but it is primarily women and mothers. They're holding down their households, whether they have children or not, but also people dealing with a lot of heavy work and issues. And so I wanted to make sure that we highlighted just what it is like to go through or even begin the healing process in a mindful manner. And so, off top, I want to ask you, like, can you recall the time in your life where you intentionally began um, pursuing the healing path in a mindful manner, and when was that?
Hmm, that's a great question. I think the first time I can say that it was intentional, I was living in Germany at the time. It was around 1998, and it was the first time I saw a yoga class that I had time to take. And I had been wanting to get into yoga for quite some time. I didn't quite know why, but it
Mhm.
was something that always appealed to me. I had practiced dance and some other movement arts in high school, and I was just like, yoga, I'm looking forward to trying that. So I knew there was something more than just movement there. So I got an opportunity. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about my phone. I got the opportunity to take my first yoga class there, and it was everything. It was totally transformative in just one class, and I
Wow.
knew it was something that was for me and that I needed to pursue and practice as a part of my life. That was the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. And so as you're talking about this transformative moment, was it something physical, emotional, or even spiritual? And as you've continued on your path, what are some of those other highlighted moments? Because I mean, I like to call them speed bumps,
Yes.
where we have these disruptions, these sometimes gentle, sometimes not so gentle disruptions in our life that causes us to like re-engage and reactivate maybe something we've come across in the passed but haven't kept moving forward. So as you've experienced speed bumps, what part of that initial activation has continued to grow and activate along the way?
Ooh. So to the first question, the type of transformation that I experienced was all three, and
Okay.
probably and energetic as well. So I definitely felt my body, I felt into my body in a different way, especially the holding. The holding in yoga is the thing. That's what gets like even the strongest men, that we practice with
Mm-hmm.
to be like, oh, right. So, but there's so much magic in that holding because we're used to being able to depart from things that are painful
Mm-hmm.
and from the fight, flight, or fear reflex complex. I'm definitely a fleer. So I'm used to leaving when there's discomfort.
Same.
Okay, right. Yeah. So that comes up on the mat. And it definitely came up there when I was holding postures, holding asanas that were just difficult at the time, or, it was like, when do we move on? And so there's just immediate breakthrough on the mental and emotional level because of that. Then from the energetic and spiritual level, there's something that's much more subtle about yoga and these other healing arts that we practice that you don't necessarily know right away, but you start to feel into it. You feel the expansion of yourself and a way that you're starting to connect with things that are not seen or felt or perceived
Mhm.
tangibly, that continues to unfold over days. And I just remember there being this shift, and there was something that it was like there was an unlocking. Now, in terms of the bumps along the way, and I have
Yeah.
had some, a few, but I would even take it to one of the greatest moments of my life, and that was the birth of my first child, and then subsequently, a few years later, my second. But I go to the first one because I used things that I had learned to that point, whether it was yoga, mindfulness, meditation, mantras, sound toning, all kinds of things were infused into my practice of birthing, which I know you can truly relate
Mhm.
to in your work.
Absolutely.
And the birth, I went from a person who had real fears around birthing a child.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's common in your practice, if you ever come across women who are like, it's going to hurt and I don't want to do that. Like, I just don't want to. But at the same time, I had transformed and transitioned rather into a holistic lifestyle where I was only eating healthy foods, no medications. And so I knew I couldn't do that. So I was able to go back to the practices that I had accumulated at that point and birth my daughters in a way that there was no pain, there was no medication, there was joy, as the
Mhm.
endorphins were invoked. And it was such a wonderful experience. And that was, for me, again, a great shifting moment as childbirth is. But it
Mhm.
also was a moment where I got to really, really know for sure what these practices had done for me up until that point, and what they were still going to do for me. So for every other bump that I've experienced,
Yeah.
um, I do want to say that there is not, for me at least, I can't pretend that I'm just walking around mindfully all the time and that the
Mhm.
bumps come and I'm like, phew, aha, let me use that.
Matrix style.
No, in fact, before you, I was just finishing a call where there were multiple fucks flown around because that's just how, we have to get down sometimes. Like, and so part of my practice and part of what I've learned is that there's a power in release, and
Mhm.
that release has to show up how it shows up authentically for you.
Yeah.
It shows up how it does for me. I love to cuss. It's part of my birthright. I like to
Listen, I learned
I
from the
like
best, honey.
me too. It's a generation.
My
That's some
grandfather was
generation.
a Marine.
Yes, my father wasn't a Marine, but he cussed like a sailor.
Mhm.
And we all heard it growing up. And I think that gave us some brass that I'm proud of, right?
Yeah.
I think even in my practices, I tell usually clients, I'm like, listen, don't come to me if you're sensitive because it's gonna come out. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that the release is important because the bumps do come and I'm not always on my square,
Yeah.
but mindfulness teaches me and reminds me to get in my square, because when we step out of our square, that's where weakness shows up. That's where we
Mhm.
are less we're less centered. And so the practices have helped with the bumps, but yeah, I have to sometimes just hit some things. I'm into contact fighting and things like that. And
Kickboxing
so,
is bang. You hear me?
hey, listen.
But you know what? You're bringing up an interesting point, and one of the reasons why this particular season I'm doing the podcast in this way is because honestly, mindfulness, as we are shown or taught kind of in the mainstream way, on my journey, I found that it is far more nuanced and deeper. And so,
Absolutely.
even when you're mentioning, okay, well, I like to cuss, or I'm not always like on my square, I feel like there are squares that are presented as long as you are expressing within this square, it's okay.
Right.
But like at the same time, in my authentic expression, in your authentic expression, in your individual moment, there are some things outside of that square that need to be expressed or said or cultivated that don't necessarily fit this like mindfulness box. And so I began to discover that it's less about the monolith of mindfulness and more about like being present and aware in who you are. And so the
Absolutely.
expressions can just look so different. And so as I have folks coming on talking about different things, I love it because literally their expression of mindfulness, your expression of mindfulness, mine is going to maybe kind of cross in some areas, but it's still going to be just as unique as the individual. And so letting people know, because I have a lot of conversations, especially with expecting families. Like, if I don't fit inside that box, I'm not doing it right.
Right,
And so
right.
there's this self judgment that comes into play. And so
Yeah,
I find myself having these conversations and going, oh, not really. There's always going to be an element that's super unique to you that you're
that's
going to bring to your community, to your experiences. You don't need to shove that or berate that or judge that to the point where you're like, oh, that shouldn't exist. If that exists, it's totally wrong, because it's a part of what we bring to the variety of living as human beings. And so particularly I wanted to ask you about, because even with the cussing, literally cussing and kickboxing,
same
and
life.
it's, but they have such a negative connotation.
Mm,
But I was talking to, I had a few clients actually that have kind of lived in this space where speaking up or cussing or these things aren't like right or okay. So one of my recommendations was, which I learned around the time when we were crossing past the Interoma, that ride, that 15-minute ride between dropping the children off to school and me going to work was cuss it up time. I
mm,
would be in my car saying everything and anything that I didn't want to or should not say to someone's face.
mhm.
And the weight that was lifted off of me, the therapeutic effect that it had on me was just so immense. And people are like, "You were what?" I was like, "I was in my car cussing
Mhm,
people out, honey, all the way
mhm.
down to the ground, honey, saying all kinds of stuff." Now,
Right.
I didn't say it to the person, but it was literally something I needed to do to get even with myself.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so I'm like, but there's so many people you wouldn't even know that stop themselves. Like they wouldn't even do that in the car by themselves.
Mhm,
But it's
mhm,
because of that self-judgment space of
mhm.
no, I can't do that. Where I'm like, okay, well, I'm not advocating for you to go cuss people out and just be out here reckless, but to have a moment with yourself, that's kind of like the first step in acknowledging certain things.
That's
Um, that can help you get through. And so when you when you have experienced some of those more charged moments where it's difficult to be on your square, especially, and you work with women, so I know that we have our particular societal expectations and framing. How did you, or how would you advise women to navigate dealing with the pain of a situation and also moving through? Because oftentimes pain can be paralyzing. So, what do you have some insight into some practical ways that we can move through as we are feeling?
Ooh. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge you for what you did for yourself, because that was medicinal. That was medicinal cussing. You know,
I love
um, you and because you're a professional singer, I don't know if your audience knows about you and your voice. Oh, it was. I'm sorry.
it. It's okay.
I'm gonna dig up everything I know about you probably by the time this is over. But your voice is extraordinary, and I've heard you. I've seen you on stage. I've seen you live, and I've seen you post that time, because that time was very significant, because you and I had some parallel experiences in terms of what could be considered heartbreak or pain, or we just
Yeah. Yeah.
we it's very interesting, you and I, with our daughters and our things and stuff. But
Oh my God, yes. I
I
wasn't
know,
even,
right?
yeah, we got a lot of
We
parallels.
got a lot of parallels. But I really just want to acknowledge you, because that aspect of your creativity and what you contribute to the world through your voice was very likely saved by you expressing and releasing what could have been blocked in that throat chakra. And I've worked with people who have had that same issue. I worked with a client over a year ago who had a very successful business, and she wanted to take it to the next level internationally, but it required her to start doing these Zooms and to do public speaking. And she had always wanted to, but she recognized there was blockage.
Mm.
And we did work to help release that blockage. And now she is kicking so much ass, and she's doing so well. And she's such a leader in her field through her voice and through what she's sharing. But what she realized was, when she was going through her traumatic experiences, she didn't have a voice. She didn't allow herself to do what she could to release it. So that is, to me, the first layer of our medicine as women, as men, as people, as humans,
Yeah.
is to free up. And freeing up is a layered practice. It is a layered practice, because there have been so many layers. There are so many layers on us to keep us from our freedom. And I'm not just talking about the ones we're aware of, like you talked about, societal norms, especially the ones that affect women.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also talking about generational layers. We're talking about layers as an outcome of systemic oppression. We're talking about layers that deal with all that pours into who we are, and that we've
Yeah.
received, through our DNA, through our bloodlines, energetically, that we're receiving consistently in the place that we live. We live in a very oppressive environment. And so to get on the path of freeing up, to get on the path of being well or healing through pain, deals with starting to unlayer the layers that have been inflicted and put upon us. And it starts with, and everything in my practice starts with movement, or let's say the physical. And that's why I've always called my practice, or identified it by the term holistic,
Mm-hmm.
because it really is a mind body practice. It really is a mind body energy practice. It really is a mind body energy and spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first element that we always can go to is the physical. So I say body, but really we mean the physical. And that deals with anything with, like you talked about, releasing through the voice, clearing our chakras, doing actual physical movement, getting up when we feel like we can't. So learning practices, sometimes you have to work with how to roll around on the floor so that you gain what you need to stand up. And I'm not talking figuratively. I've worked with people who have not been able to get up out of bed for days at a time. And
Wow.
how am I going to come to them and tell them, let's sit and meditate, in some type of seated half lotus
Yeah.
when they literally have, they're almost to a point of atrophy in certain areas of their body.
Yeah.
So there, and the other thing about why we start on the physical realm or level is because the body is the truth teller. All the stories that we can create.
No, I'm shaking my head. I am nodding because honestly, some of my most you're talking about layers, and I know I often talk about the spiral staircase, and people are like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
And I'm like, we can constantly, like, we'll never arrive, but we're always on this spiral going down. And it's like, if you're addressing an issue here and then you walk down the stairs, by the time you get back to that point, you're now discovering a deeper level of maybe that same issue, or you're getting closer to the root. And so healing in life is really like we're constantly walking down this spiral staircase.
Absolutely.
But I had some amazing, beautiful sessions with a somatic therapist.
Nice.
And one of the exercises, based upon me trying to get to the root and kind of digging into some like childhood and ancestral whatever, was literally balling up on the floor in a fetal position,
Mm,
tight, 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 and then like opening up and expanding and then bringing it back in. And
yes.
oh
Yes.
my goodness,
Yes.
because body keeps score. But then there's also things in our DNA that were activated
That's
when we
right.
cross Earthside,
That's right.
that before we even had a level of awareness, that stuff was already sitting in our body. So there's
Hmm.
issues and challenges that we've had since we were infants that we're
Yes.
just coming to discovery of as adults. And so feeling those centers open and unlock and getting clarity and really freedom, because the people in our lineages, yourself, myself, we're unlocking, chains that didn't even belong to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the freedom of like, woo, like feeling that stuff release, you're like, yes, like this is a new feeling. This is a new kind of like
Yes.
a different kind of bop when you release
Right.
certain chains. You're like, okay. And so it's like, it's so amazing, but it's like understanding that. And
Hmm. Hmm.
understanding that it's not like a checklist of,
Hmm.
oh, okay, I did
Right.
that.
There is nothing to check off. Like if we could just really make that clear, there is nothing to check off and say, that's done. Okay, moving right along. Okay, we went to therapy. We talked about this. I cried. I recognized that it was something mommy said to me at this point, and now here I am, and I'm good. No, no, no. Because like you said, and I love that spiral staircase analogy, you're going to circle back around. There will be another trigger that will appear to be different, but take you right back to something that still needs more work.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I consider that a blessing because we are so, when we start this work to heal ourselves and to engage hopefully with guides or healers and I use that plurally because I do think it takes usually more than one person
Yeah.
to support our transformation. um, when we start to connect to that work, it is the message to the universe that we are open and we're ready, and things start to show up for us to take us on that journey. Just like
Yeah.
when we're being real, stubborn, and we're like, I'm not ready, I don't want to hear it, and we get smacked, we get that bump that you talked about. And I used to describe it as like, yeah, the universe likes to like tap me, and then it's like a little nudge, and then it might be a mush. I get mushed a lot, and then that one.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and fall down that flight of steps right now so I can just let you know what's
In an
up?
ugly way. Your legs
Yo,
is flipping and up, and
naughty
hair got
ugly.
caught in the
Right,
rail and everything.
right. Really ugly. Right. Limping after like all kinds of stuff. And enough is enough. Like that should be a tagline for
But
here.
but it's not enough for certain personalities. So I'm
Right.
listening and I'm
So
going,
how do we get?
ooh, yeah, I'm hard-headed too. Whoa. And last year I had a moment and I was like, all right, it was just me and the most high. I was like, all right, what is it? And it was like these images and these scenarios that I really am still, I was just talking to somebody about it. I can trace it back to like being a teenager or being a preteen and having this very stubborn, rebellious nature activated because of
Mm,
my environment.
yeah.
But it didn't stay reactive to just that environment. It became a part of who I was and how I responded and engaged with people in certain scenarios, depending on the trigger.
Hmm.
And so it was like these things were just coming up and being revealed where it's like, you were so stubborn based upon, that season, but you carried that with you that you've had to have these speed bumps and these knockdowns and these KOs because you didn't release it. It was a protective measure, so to speak, but you didn't keep it at the protective measure. You now carried it past its due season.
Hmm.
And how often do we carry defense mechanisms or cultural things we've been handed down by our families and communities that no longer serve us, that get us mollywopped
Right.
consistently because we won't let it go?
And I see that show up most within Black women. I see that show up most within Black women, naturally so, because there has been so much imprinted on us.
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about societal norms, we're really talking about gender oppression. We're really talking about misogyny. We're really talking about toxic masculinity. And then through that lens, the teaching of toxic femininity, right? And we're talking about, racism, and we're talking about all kinds of things. We're talking about, I don't even know what the numbers are now in terms of sexual abuse on Black girls, or verbal abuse, or physical abuse, or being in homes where someone was abused and you were aware of it and you learned to live through it, or you survived through it,
We're told to be quiet.
or told to be quiet, or the just what it meant to be a girl growing up and being told to be nice to people that didn't feel good to be around.
But also, even when you're talking about that, I'm thinking about, and this is like insane, but based upon my experience and observations, it's almost like straight out of the womb, we're handed a basket that's bigger than we are with
Mm,
stuff in it and told to hold that for everybody
absolutely.
else.
Hold it for everybody. And guess what? Your value is based on how well you hold that basket,
Oh, girl, you
and
are so
how good you look
strong.
doing it. Or even better, yeah, don't even look good doing it. Look Ramshak, and let us talk about, we can tell you're really struggling, and maybe we'll just maybe add a little feather to that basket, or a little at a
We
time.
won't give you a rock. We'll just give you a feather. Like, no, don't give me
Yes.
anything. Empty
Don't
this
get
thing
me, take
out.
some shit out of the basket. Like, help me put this basket down.
But
So
like,
that's what we're learning. But you're right. We build things up to cope with seasons that were very, very difficult for us or
yeah,
traumatic for us. Your stubbornness was probably the best way you, at that
it
age and
saved my
stage,
life.
honey, I'm so sure. I'm so
It
sure.
saved my life. And when you're talking about those boxes, there is a reckoning. Just in
Mm,
my own experience, and this is just still unfolding and healing, but there were aspects of my personality that I needed to keep. But then you're constantly berated. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. And then because I often work in extremes, then I just let them all go. I'm not,
mhm,
I'm not going to be that anymore at all. I'm holding, you tell me my boundaries are too strong? No boundaries. I'm going to trust everybody. I'm going to believe everything and na. We'll see. And then the smacks and the KOs that come with that. And it was like having a meeting with myself, my inner child, and saying, and that somatic therapy was very helpful because it's like, that warrior can be on guard. You
Mm,
can hold those boundaries and she can simultaneously feel safe. You don't need to be bullied or convinced that you should have none of these things. It needs to evolve into a healthy, perspective, because letting go and not having any of those things gets you almost into far more trouble, because now you're not dealing with somebody saying, "Oh, you cut people off too quick," or "You're not trusting enough," or whatever the case may be. Now you're inviting a whole world of chaos into your close environment, and how saying no, I need to honor who I was created to be in an
mm,
evolved manner. I'm not saying it's okay to be operating out of the spaces as it showed up as a young person, but me being able to have discernment and sound judgment and things like that, those things aren't wrong.
that's right.
It's just the people that don't respect that don't want you to hold that space. Not
Absolutely not.
convenient. Oh,
Right.
you
Oh,
got
no.
boundaries now?
Right.
Who you think you are? You got boundaries?
Right.
Yeah. And it was crazy, because even when we're talking about generationally, and
Mm.
girl, I had to check myself. I don't know if this was in your house, but if your parents asked you to do something, there was an expectation that you would literally like hop to it and get it done
Oh.
like in
Mm.
an instant.
Hmm.
So it may be about a year or so now, but I'm like, guys, we do our chores on certain days, yada yada yada. Make sure you get this done, make sure you get that done. Well, I'm used to, when you see somebody cleaning, you just start
You
cleaning
start cleaning.
immediately.
Yeah, right, right. You
Oh,
don't
we're
stand
all
around and look
cleaning.
still while somebody's cleaning, especially an adult. Yeah.
So I gave the list, everybody acknowledged it. Okay, okay, okay. And my oldest hops into the shower. And Kiad, I'm not gonna lie, there was a little fire that lit up, like the audacity. And so she had a shower about 10, 15 minutes, and she liked them
Right,
luxurious.
of course, because our children luxuriate. Of course, of course.
So I had a moment, but I don't know if it was like my energy. I don't know what it was. I was like, God, is that you? Because it was like, but is she wrong though?
Ooh,
She has mastered, and she has, filling her own cup, making sure that she's taken care of before she gets into the business of the day.
that's right.
And if you come in and you say something about it, or you get snippy about it, why though? What are you actually teaching her? Or has she mastered something that you have yet to master, and you feel some kind of way about it? Why don't you take your shower and drink your coffee first before you get into the day?
Do everybody in the house a favor, why don't you?
Listen, but it was like a self check, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh snap. And I was like, but as you're talking about breaking those generational patterns of like, as a young girl, like, no, I said do it now, hop to it, jump how high. I was actually happy that there was space enough for her to not be living in that.
Right.
And then um wholly aware of how to, okay, how do I say this? Like, there's space enough for the next generation to maybe not experience those things that we've experienced, but we're still learning and cultivating that space for ourselves as we have
Absolutely.
freed them from that particular thing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I was like,
Yeah.
oh my, but when you're talking about women and how we're trained, I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Right.
But I
Right.
was so offended, like, how dare she take a shower first before she get to clean? And then I'm like, that's what she's supposed to do. Like, all she's doing is taking care of herself. And it was like a foreign concept.
Right. Isn't that something? The programming is deep.
So deep.
And because it's programming, of course, we're going to continue the scripts of the program
Mhm.
unknowingly until we figure it out or until
Yeah.
something shows up to show us that what we're doing and show us an alternative. And I think it is so great that we of our generation have children who are our freedom leaders.
Yeah.
And I give so much thanks. And I even, my parents weren't quite like yours. I am a child of divorce. So by the time I was 6, my parents weren't together. So we lived between homes.
Mhm.
My father was very active and amazing. My mother was very active and amazing. And they had their human flaws.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, some of which I'm still like, oh, I got to work on that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they were amazing too. But so they were like a little bit different for their generation. They were kind of like, I mean, they were, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and they were, David Bowie, and they were,
Mhm. Yeah.
Santana and all of that. So it was just like they were artists and academic, so it was just
Mhm.
like they weren't quite so rigid, and that was great. And there were flaws in that for me, in terms of how I could have been a little bit more disciplined and
Yeah.
structured and things. But thankfully they poured what they could into me so that I can pour what I can into my children. And my
Yeah.
children are growing up better and freer than I did. And they definitely show me. My daughters will even turn and ask me questions, especially that little one, the Selah Dela thing.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, these people who were born on the same day. These Libras, yo, these Libras.
They will check you
Um,
in a second, honey.
and who
Subtly. Subtly,
told
like,
us to birth Libras?
so.
So
Da-da-da-da-da.
right. So you're just going to be hypocritical to your own message? Like they don't say those words, but that's what they're saying. Sailor
Yeah.
checks me all the time in that way. And with a thing like what you talked about with your oldest, like they'll do something and I'll kind of, how dare you?
Mhm.
That's you respecting me and just that. And I'm
Mhm.
like, is it really not that
Is
though?
it?
Is it?
Is it
And I'll
really?
have to be like, all right,
Or is this like an ego control thing? And
absolutely. And that,
um,
and mindfulness, and I know you've had someone, come on and do, or you will, someone about mindful parenting, but that again, how else can we get to the center of who we are as the higher level humans or spirits having this human experience or whatever you want to call it, than through our parenting,
yeah.
where we have an opportunity where we could absolutely become oppressive ogres. I mean, even the law allows it to some extent. Society expects it in a certain way, because I
Mhm.
know some of the inner dialogue or monologue is other voices that have, some weight and have at some point made you feel like you weren't mothering well enough because you're too
Mhm.
loose and too easy and
Mhm.
and it really takes a lot of introspective work, a lot of listening, a lot of being present
Yeah.
with our children and ourselves in a very honest way in order to see who we are showing up as and
Mhm.
who we really are and what our goals really are, and then to realign and shift for that. But our
Yeah.
children are here to, and if we do that within our parenting, I do believe it pours over into how we interact with everybody else in the world.
Absolutely. I hold the perspective that parenting is a spiritual path. I call, parenting as a path because with each child, obviously, my children are very spaced out, but 17, 11, and 6. And I can mark between those years of having each child the spiritual growth, the lessons, the revealing that has happened literally just by raising them and teaching them and cultivating them. There is no time that I am talking to them about anything that isn't a result of work
Mhm.
that's been done or a reminder of work that still needs to be done.
Yes.
And so it's like you can, to me, you can't parent without having your soul revealed to
Whew.
you. Now you
Yeah.
can choose to ignore it if you want to. People do it every day,
Yeah.
but you're still accountable for the information. I'm homeschooling, like homeschooling
Mhm.
the 6-year old. The other two, my girls are virtual schooling. And like you said, I'm starting, like, I'm getting these narratives in my head, and then I'm like, wait a second, what?
Mm.
Is that actually important? why am I telling him this? Or,
Mm,
you know, thinking about what is learning, what is education. And I am the more, artsy fartsy parent. I am very immersive. But as he begins to communicate what he's learning, I'm over here like, we didn't do 6 worksheets today. And I know better. But some days, and with this pandemic and homeschool reviews and all that, but like, oh, well, we went over the life cycle of a seed, and we learned about the history of jazz, and we skated and got some physical education in, and we planted, and then it's like, man, but it's a consistent um reckoning. Like, you consistently have to vibrate and get back to this, like,
yes.
okay space where it's like, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough. No, and then
Yes.
as a mother, it's like, well, am I supposed to just be barefoot and cooking like all
No.
day to be a good mother? And it's all of these things, even doing this and saying, okay, well, guys, I'm recording this podcast. I need you to da 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 da, like creating boundaries, and understanding what does business look like, and what does honoring space for each other as we all do the things.
Right.
And it's those things are spiritual lessons. Those are uprooting things where it's like, no, we all have to learn something here. But as parents, we like to, well, we're taught like, I'm the adult, da 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 da. Like, we haven't arrived. We've not at all arrived. So even when you're
Right.
talking about uh, mindful parenting is not, to me, it's not separate from any of the issues that we're talking about.
That's right. That's right.
Because when you're talking about healing, and we're talking about how we've made it over these speed bumps and what we've had to implement, as I go over those speed bumps, I'm sharing with
Hmm.
my children how I got over that speed bump. And it may not be details about the speed bump, but as I'm healing, I am parenting through the healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And how else would we want to interact with the people that we love the most on the planet and that we are spiritually responsible for? You
Mhm.
know, my belief is that we are actually only responsible for a very few number of people. First ourselves,
Mhm.
those that we birth, and those who birthed us.
Yeah.
That is my belief. That is a to me a spiritual contract that we come here through, and it's an agreement that we all take in, and that's why you see, in all indigenous lineages, all of them, there
Mhm.
is the same idea through different mandalas, through different ways of expressing that you as an individual are working to take yourself into ascension in your own humanity, to align yourself so that you are living in an upright way,
Yeah.
because you have those that you have to pour into, which are your children,
Mhm.
and you have to constantly support and uplift your the people who brought you here,
Mhm.
even into the ancestral realm, which again we see throughout all of the indigenous spiritual traditions. So that is something that, to me, when you see something repeated throughout all practices, there must be some truth there.
Yeah.
And to me, that's how we must live. So when we, as women and as men, decide that we are going to do work to be well and to heal ourselves and to confront what there is to confront, all the boogeymen, all the goblins and things under the bed and the things that
Yeah.
go bump in the night in the closets. When we're willing to go on that journey, we are immediately starting to, I believe, pay into our karmic contract, because we're going to be better people and we're going to pour into the children. Forget about, I'm doing this so I can be a healer and heal the masses, or I'm doing this so I can be a great leader and lead the, millions. Okay, maybe that will be an outcome. Maybe that would be wonderful.
Mhm.
However, and we've seen this throughout history, just in a very pragmatic way, when people jump the gun and go into that leadership role, but they're not taking care of home and they're not taking care of self. And
Mhm.
we see the children of said leaders and how they are, they're torn apart. They're not well because they weren't poured into, because the people who jumped into leadership roles or roles as healers or whatever are not doing the work within themselves.
Yeah.
I remember a woman, she and I are friends, but she was receiving some work from me, and I was sharing with her just some of the challenge I had at the time about, I work with children and I work with women, and I don't know how to sometimes like make sure people know that I do both and all, and then, and I work with men now too. And some of the work that I do with women is so central in nature. And so about attuning to our sexuality and our sensuality as a means of healing and as a way of embracing our power and our womanhood and our freedom. And I was like, ooh, some of the stuff we do, if people think about me working with their children, they might be like, wait, oh, hold on, is that Mama
What's she doing? What's she
Keny?
doing over there?
And she was like, sis, the work you do with women helps us be the mothers we need to be for the children that we're raising.
Exactly.
Like, she was just talking about how it transformed her mothering because of how it's freeing her up and how it has enabled her to be freed up in herself, but also have greater space and capacity to be the mother that she needs and wants to be.
Capacity is the word.
Listen.
Creating and having greater capacity can transform 7 generations, honey.
Yes.
Yes. And I love this, and I love having this conversation because it's less about getting up on a soapbox and touting what we know and what we've experienced, as much about just talking about these things, getting the information out so that whoever is listening, it could plant a seed in their mind and possibly impact their family. Because like, I'm big on ripples. I feel like you toss a little stone out there and you never know where the ripple is going to go. I don't need to know where the ripple is going to go, but we have a ripple. The biggest stones, though, that are going to create these waves, that's what you're talking about with your children, with your parents. And just as much conversation that I'm having with my girls, I'm having with my mom, I'm even having with my dad. Like, as I've begun healing on a, like, I guess you could say I've gone down a couple spirals, right? Not arrived at all. But as I come across information that even pertains to them, I'm able to have beautiful, sometimes uncomfortable conversations to allow them to be safe and open. Because honestly, we can say this generation, but each generation must have done something to contribute to the fact that you and I can be in the spaces that we're in.
Exactly.
It had to happen.
That's right.
We're not like some unicorns that said, oh my God, there's a level of sacrifice and certain generational curses that they have broken.
That's right.
That allowed us to be here, and we're doing this work, and that allows another level of generational curses to be broken with it, because it's so deep and so entrenched. We don't want our children to deal with the same things, but they're going to have different things that they're charged to be, the handlers of and the healers of. And so I appreciate that, because that has been just an opportunity to really see my parents like as human beings, like see them as spirit beings, and be like, ooh, learning more about the journey every day. It's tremendous. But that concept of like healing backward and healing forward is just, it's so divine, because when you're in it, you start to see like, oh, and there's some freedom in only being concerned about the ones you birthed and the ones that birthed you. Everyone else is an extra. Everyone else
absolutely is. That's right. And you find that it doesn't diminish your purpose on the planet. It doesn't, we're not telling anyone out there who knows that your job is to be a healer or to be a writer or to be a performer or whatever. We're not saying don't pursue what you're here to do as your vocation, That is absolutely important. The first step is the work,
Mhm.
and the most ongoing work. I mean,
Yeah.
the spiral staircase has no, we don't see the end of it, right?
Never.
Right. So it's just saying that I think what we're saying is that that work has to be a priority. We have to reprioritize how we work in the world and with those
Yeah.
around us. We have to know that yes, we're here to do work and be of service to those outside of our homes. However, the most important work, the first work, the most
Yeah.
perpetual work is the work within ourselves. And then that feeds into the work that we do in our parenting and as the children of, and it
Mhm.
grows from there. And when you talked about the opening, what that does for our parents, oh my gosh, and the healing, like you can see, I'm sure you've actually been able to see energetically the layers coming off of your parents
Yep.
when you're now able to communicate with them from where you are in your journey.
And
And
also stripping away judgment. Like,
absolutely right.
it's for me, I was the child, at 18, I thought I was grown. I'm over here with my 4-page letters, like, and another thing. Um and very vocal about, and even over through the years, not just then. And then there gets to be this moment. I don't know exactly when that moment is, but I've gotten to that moment where, well, maybe because my big girl is graduating, and I'm like, well, wait a second. I've literally done the absolute best that I could have done with everything that I had. And so,
Yes.
um, obviously lacking perfection, I'm now like in a position of like, oh, I have a grown folk now. And so viewing what that might have been like from my
Mhm.
parents' perspective to be, judged about whatever it is they did or didn't do, and kind of sitting back in this place of acceptance and understanding and learning more. Because honestly, I'm learning so much more that I've not been in a position of judgment to hear more about their stories. Like, in the nuances and the depths and the pains and the I mean, literally brand new stories that I've never heard, but they absolutely make sense. And so it's like I'm gaining even understanding of how and why my childhood went the way that it did, just simply from not being in a seated place of judgment. And so, um, having those conversations with my children now, like, listen, this is where we at. Like, I'm a human. I love you dearly. I'll die for you. But I'm absolutely just doing the best that I can with what I have. And one day you'll do the best with what you have, and that's okay. And it's beautiful. And there's like this connecting string with all of us, this gold cord that just goes through the generations. And it's just like we're still dancing together. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
end. You know what I
Yeah. That's
mean? Like,
right. That's right.
we're always dancing. Some children are growing taller or whatever, and the string goes up on this end, but we're still, you know what I mean? So we're still like in
It's
it,
just
and
connective cord. That's right.
we're never not gonna be, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's beautiful. So as we wrap things up, is there any insight or gems that you want to leave on the ears of the
Mm.
folks that will listen in before we close out?
I think the thing that you said in what you were last expressing is so critical, and that is releasing judgment, releasing shame. It is time for us to let that go. It has no place or space in our present or future. And if I could encourage everyone who's listening to just think about that as a starting point, even if you are going through a process of that reckoning of thinking about, oh man, this is what I did. You can talk about, you can have the inner conversations about what is so. It is so that, I had my son when I was 18 and I wasn't really ready and I wasn't very happy about it. And it is so that for the first 5 years of his life, I wasn't the kindest to him. That is so. And you breathe that out and you say, you know what? I did the best that I could with where I was at that time, because that's all of us.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage, because I think that the holding of shame and guilt around certain things is its own weight, and it does show up in the body and it shows up everywhere else, and it can do us in. So I would just encourage everyone to um, be willing to go into a practice of just accepting what is so, and breathing through that and saying and then going into a space of acceptance of you for wherever you were, or even if that word was yesterday or before the moment
Yeah.
before you started that practice, you're like, oh, I did that and I said that. We can't do anything about that except to do work within ourselves to move forward and to heal everyone that was involved, including ourselves, through letting go of the guilt and the shame and stepping forward into, okay, now let's mend some of those wounds. And yeah, I think that's a great first step for all of us, and an ongoing step whenever things show up. Oftentimes we get stuck in things thinking about what someone did, because we have been enculturated into believing that there must be guilt set somewhere. That's a belief system and a practice system that is so far removed from indigenous cultural values,
Mm.
i.e., what keeps us well. So we tend to put blame on the most obvious. And somewhere in that, if we do enough research, we'll find out that that's because there's a part of us that we're also holding on to as a person to blame.
Yeah.
So just let go of it. Just let it go. Just work to let it go. Commit to it. And just watch
Ashe.
what that magic does for you.
No, that's real talk. Amen. Like, just the release alone, it doesn't mean that doesn't mean that the wound has begun to heal. But like you said, that release is like getting some air on it,
Get some air on it. Uh-huh. Yes,
and allowing those cells to begin to regenerate.
that's right.
And that's just amazing, and helpful and useful in the long run for the
Good.
whole entire world. Um, so where can people follow you and your work and your workshops and your classes? Can you tell the people?
I can. If you are on Facebook, you can follow me, Keny Moon, KENYMOON on Facebook. On Instagram, Holistic Keny, all one word. I have a website that is in development and should be ready for you to look at maybe by next week, and that is simply kennymoon.com. I wanted to keep
Awesome.
it simple. Yeah. So on that, there will be places you can click all over for any of the practices that you're interested in. And I'm here, I'm available, and I'm looking forward to being of service as I continue to be supported in my own journey. And I thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this opportunity and
You're
this
welcome.
conversation.
This was beautiful, and this I think we need more. We need more of this because it's such a heart space,
It is.
and it's an opportunity for um, as humans and our spirits to really just to connect and to learn and to share in ways that like we don't have our circles anymore,
I know.
you
I
know
know. I know.
so
There's a
when you
missing.
think about like a tribe and a community and a village, there's some point in a day that the elders, the children, everyone is crossing one another in this circular space, and we don't.
Right.
Everything is nuclear or technological and all of that, and but
Yeah,
there's an
people are laying
energy.
eyes on each other. We're not, you know how the old folks say, baby, let me lay eyes on you. They like hold you on your shoulders and be like, let me lay eyes on you, baby.
But what are they doing? They're
They're
reading your
really
energy
feeling you. Exactly.
and they're
Exactly.
checking in like, "Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo."
Yo, they check, they do a scan, right?
All right, we
Listen
gonna
to that.
talk after,
Mhm.
get you a plate. We gonna talk sugar. But that
Yeah,
energy,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
there's a when you're in that circular space, there's an energy in the cipher that's
Mm-hmm.
cultivated. And I miss that
Mm-hmm.
and
Me
trying
too.
my best to recreate it in the ways that I can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mama Keny Moon for joining us, and everyone who tuned in for this particular episode, thank you. And I look forward to speaking with you all soon.
Thank
Peace.
you all.